Welcome to True Crime Documentary, the podcast that explores the darkest corners of human nature and the stories that shock communities. Today's episode takes us to Roseville, Minnesota, where a jealous mom brutally beat her teenage daughter to death after discovering she had been sleeping with her step. Kayla Carlson was an 18-year-old senior at Roseville High School in Minnesota. She worked part-time at the local Target. Despite being known as a quiet, thoughtful girl, Kayla's life was far from simple behind the scenes. She had a turbulent home life, largely due to her strained relationship with her mother, Dina Carlson. Kayla and Dina's relationship had always been difficult, but in recent years it had worsened. Dina, who struggled with alcoholism and emotional instability, often clashed with her daughter. Jealousy seemed to be at the heart of their issues. Dina saw Kayla's youth and attractiveness as a threat. Kayla, a slender and attractive teenager, had started getting attention from boys at school, and her mother didn't handle it well. Dana, whose beauty was drained by years of alcoholism and drug use, was insecure about her looks and felt that her daughter's growing independence and beauty were taking something away from her. The tension between them escalated when Kayla began secretly sleeping with Thea's husband, David Carlson. David, a 36-year-old construction worker, had been in a relationship with Dina for 5 years. He was rough around the edges, and his reputation wasn't the best. He had been involved in several domestic disputes, even being arrested for an altercation with Dina inside the Target store where Kayla worked. Over time, however, David's relationship with Kayla quickly grew inappropriate. The two began an affair which Dina didn't immediately know about, but Kayla's guilt and anxiety over the secret made the home environment even more tense. Kayla's dreams reflected her desire to escape the chaos of her home life. She had been planning to move out after graduation, hoping to attend a community college and later transfer to University of Arizona in Tucson, where her grandparents lived. She talked about her dreams of leaving Minnesota to friends, spending hours scrolling through Instagram, watching Netflix, and fantasizing about a future where she could leave her troubled home behind. However, the days leading up to her death were anything but hopeful. Kayla found herself caught between the suffocating jealousy of her mother and the secret sexual relationship with David. But tension in her house was unbearable, and while Kayla continued to plan her escape, she may have sensed that her time was running out. It was the morning of March 28, 2017, when Kayla Carlson's body was discovered. The storm that hit Roseville, Minnesota the night before had left the streets covered in snow with temperatures well below freezing around 8 a.m. A maintenance worker from Roseville High School, identified as Richard Grenville, was doing his usual rounds when he noticed something unusual in the parking lot. At first he thought it was a pile of snow pushed up by a plow, but as he got closer, he saw the horrifying truth: Kayla's lifeless body lying partially covered in snow without any clothing. Shocked, Grenville immediately called 911, reporting what he had found. The cold, windswept parking lot provided a grim backdrop to the discovery. Kayla's body showed clear signs of physical trauma. Her skin was bruised, and there were scratches on her face and arms. Grenville was visibly shaken, telling the police dispatcher that it looked like she had been left outside for hours. The blizzard had nearly buried her, and it was clear to him that she hadn't survived the brutal overnight conditions after the call. Grenville waited for the police to arrive. He stayed calm. The witnesses said he looked pale and nervous as he stood by the school entrance away from the body. The freezing temperatures had preserved the body to some extent, but Kayla's cause of death wasn't immediately obvious given the weather and her injuries. It was clear that something far more sinister than hypothermia was at play. When the police arrived minutes later, they quickly cordoned off the area and began their investigation. The officers noted that Kayla's body showed clear signs of physical assault, with multiple bruises and injuries evident on her skin. The frigid temperatures and heavy snowfall were also significant factors leading the authorities to suspect that Kayla had been left there intentionally. The official cause of death would later be ruled as hypothermia, but the circumstances surrounding her death raised immediate suspicions of foul play. Investigators began to piece together the events that led to this horrific discovery, seeking answers about what had happened to Kayla in the hours leading up to her death. The shocking nature of the crime sent ripples through the community, leaving friends and family devastated and searching for explanations. In the aftermath of this tragedy, the Roseville police arrived at the scene within minutes of the 911 call. On March 28, 2017, Detective Gretchen S.R. Engine, a 15-year veteran known for her Thamus, led the investigation. The snow-covered parking lot presented at a grim scene. Kayla Carlson's body was quickly identified by the personal items found near her, including her phone, which had fallen out of her bag. Her frozen body showed visible signs of trauma. Her face and arms were bruised, and there were clear indications that she had been beaten before being dumped outside. Detective Saar Engen and her team immediately suspected foul play, while the blizzard had likely accelerated her death. The bruises suggested Kayla had been attacked before being left in the cold. The medical examiner later confirmed that the official cause of death was hypothermia, but she had been unconscious when she was left in the snow, unable to save herself per injuries. Particularly the blunt force trauma to her head suggested she had been beaten severely, likely rendering her unconscious before being dragged into the elements. The police believed Kayla had been killed elsewhere and then dumped in the high school parking lot. There were no signs of a struggle in the snow around her body, which led investigators to conclude she had been moved post-assault. The killer had likely used the blizzard to cover their tracks, hoping that the snow would hide the evidence. However, detectives were able to piece together the sequence of events based on the lack of blood at the scene and the pattern of the bruises on her body using thermal imaging equipment. Detectives scanned the area for footprints and other clues, but the heavy snowfall had erased most traces. The investigators collected any possible evidence, including tire tracks that were still faintly visible near where her body was found. With the scene secured, these police turned their attention to potential suspects, knowing that whoever had done this had taken advantage of one of the worst snowstorms of the year to hide their crime. David Carlson, 36, was the first person investigators turned their attention to. Known for his volatile temper and violent history, David had been dating Kayla's mother, Dina, for 5 years. A construction worker with a rough reputation around Roseville, he had been involved in several domestic disputes over the years. His relationship with Dina had been anything but peaceful. Police records showed multiple incidents of physical altercations between the two, often fueled by alcohol and David's controlling nature. One of the most notorious incidents occurred just months before Kayla's death, in the very store where she worked in late 2016. David had flown into a rage inside the Target grocery store, where Kayla was a part-time cashier. Witnesses described seeing him drag Dina by the arm down one of the aisles, eventually whipping her with his belt in front of stunned shoppers. The outburst had been triggered by a small argument over groceries, but it quickly escalated into a public display of David's violent tendencies. Dina had refused to press charges after the incident, citing her dependence on him both financially and emotionally. This incident stood out to detectives as they dug deeper into David's background, painting a picture of a man who was used to controlling the women in his life through fear and aggression. When David was brought in for questioning, following Kayla's murder, his behavior was detached and cold. He showed little concern for Kayla's death, and it wasn't long before detectives uncovered an even darker secret. David admitted that his relationship with Kayla had turned sexual in recent months, although he refused to elaborate on how it started or the nature of their relationship. The revelation added a disturbing layer to the case. The police now had a motive. David had become intimately involved with his girlfriend's daughter, and the tension within the household had been growing. Kayla's friends later revealed that she had confided in them about her mother's increasing jealousy. This revelation raised the stakes in the investigation, although David didn't show signs of guilt during his interrogation. His violent history and disturbing relationship with Kayla made him a prime suspect. However, his calm and seemingly emotionless responses during questioning kept investigators from jumping to conclusions too soon. Dina Carlson, 40, had long struggled with alcoholism and emotional instability. Her dependency on alcohol, combined with her inability to hold a steady job, had left her vulnerable and reliant on her husband, David, for both financial support and a steady supply of booze over the years. Dana's emotional state had deteriorated, and many of her neighbors described her as erratic, often swinging between moments of calm and sudden outburst. While she occasionally worked odd jobs, she was largely unemployed, and David's income as a construction worker was her main lifeline. This created a toxic dynamic in their relationship, with Dina feeling trapped by her depend on him. Dina's struggles with her self-worth were only compounded by the jealousy she harbored toward her daughter, Kayla. Kayla, at 18, was everything Dina felt she no longer could be: young, attractive, and with her whole life ahead of her. As Kayla grew older and blossomed, Dina's insecurities deepened. Friends and family noted that Dina would often make passive-aggressive remarks about Kayla's appearance, suggesting that she felt overshadowed by her own daughter. This jealousy only intensified when Dina discovered that Kayla had entered into a sexual relationship with David. The knowledge that her daughter, the very person she had raised, had become involved with her husband, pushed Dina's emotional instability to its limits. The fact that Kayla, the person she had always felt envious of, was now having sex with David was something Dina couldn't accept. When police brought Dina in for questioning after Kayla's death, she appeared disheveled and agitated, a far cry from the calm, cooperative demeanor she had displayed when officers first arrived at the crime scene. Her story seemed inconsistent, and she often rambled about her own troubles with David, blaming him for her unhappiness and the fights that often broke out between them. Investigators noted that Dina was highly emotional, but whether this stemmed from genuine grief or a deeper, more dangerous turmoil was unclear during interrogation. Dina admitted that she had been aware of the growing closeness between David and Kayla, though she downplayed the significance of their relationship. However, detective couldn't ignore the tension that had clearly been brewing in the household. Dina's feelings of inadequacy, combined with her dependence on David and her resentment toward Kayla, painted a picture of a woman on the edge. While Deanna initially claimed she had no part in Kayla's death, the detectives began to suspect that her jealousy may have played a much larger role than she was letting on. Lucas Doyle, 17, was Kayla Carlson's ex-boyfriend and had a reputation for being a talented athlete. With the short temper, he and Kayla had dated for over a year, and during that time, Lucas had shown signs of jealousy and possessiveness traits that grew worse toward the end of their relationship. By March of 2017, their relationship had become strained, and Kayla eventually broke things off. According to friends, Lucas took the breakup, struggling to accept that Kayla wanted to move on with her life in the days leading up to Kayla's death. Witnesses reported seeing Lucas and Kayla arguing in public several times. One of these arguments took place at a local mall where they had both run into each other near a Starbucks. Tensions flared when Kayla mentioned her plans to leave Roseville and start fresh. Lucas had always feared losing control over the people in his life, and Kayla's decision to move on without him seemed to hit a nerve. He was known to have a strong competitive streak on the football field, and that drive to win seemed to extend of his personal relationships as well. When police brought Lucas in for questioning, he initially appeared calm but distant, a stark contrast to the more emotional reactions of the other suspects. He explained that while he and Kayla had broken up, they had remained on civil terms. However, investigators were quick to pick up on the inconsistencies in his story. He seemed evasive when asked about the nature of their arguments and grew visibly uncomfortable. When the subject of her leaving town came up, detectives believed Lucas had a possible motive rooted in jealousy and rejection. He had been unable to control Kayla during their relationship, and her desire to move on may have pushed him over the edge. While Lucas maintained his innocence throughout the interrogation, his body language and attitude suggested he wasn't telling the whole truth. His frustration over Kayla's independence and future plans made him a person of interest, and police felt he could have lashed out in a moment of rage, despite Lucas's efforts to distance himself from the situation. His connection to Kayla, combined with his history of emotional volatility, kept him under close scrutiny. Investigators knew they had to keep digging to determine whether Lucas had played a role in her tragic death. The investigation took an unexpected turn in late March 2017, when police uncovered crucial new evidence that shed light on Kayla Carlson's intentions leading up to her death. It was a bitterly cold morning, and a heavy snowfall from a late-season blizzard still blanketed the streets of Roseville, Minnesota. Police had been combing through Kayla's digital footprints, social media texts, and email accounts when they discovered a series of messages exchanged between Kayla and Lucas Doyle. The text revealed something startling. Kayla had been secretly planning to leave Roseville and hitchhike to Arizona, where her grandparents had retired. In these messages, Kayla confided in Lucas about her desire to escape the turmoil of her home life. She had been growing more fearful for her safety, expressing doubts about her ability to stay in her mother's house any longer. She felt trapped by the toxic environment, her mother's jealousy, David's advances, and the suffocating drama that surrounded them. The messages painted a picture of a young woman desperate for a fresh start from the chaos that had taken over her life. The police immediately shifted their focus, realizing that Kayla's plans to leave had likely escalated tensions at home. They suspected that Dina Carlson, Kayla's mother, might have discovered her daughter's plan to escape and reacted violently, with Kayla's close relationship with David already a source of jealousy. Learning that Kayla was planning to abandon her may have pushed Dino over the edge. Investigators began to dig deeper into Dina's recent behavior and her whereabouts on the night of Kayla's death. The discovery of these texts also raised new questions about Lucas Doyle. Had he been aware of the danger Kayla was in? Was he somehow involved in her plan to leave, or even her death? The Lucas's emotional volatility and past arguments with Kayla had made him a suspect. The new evidence suggested that his role might be more complicated than police had initially thought. This new development provided a clearer motive for the crime and allowed investigators to start piecing together the events leading up to Kayla's murder. It was now race against time to determine who out of the people closest to Kayla was capable of committing such a brutal act. As police pieced together the new evidence from Kayla's digital messages and witness interviews, they zeroed in on Dina Carlson. The final breakthrough came when investigators uncovered that Dina had discovered not only Kayla's plan to leave, but also her daughter's ongoing sexual relationship with David Carlson, her husband, and Kayla Stepdad. The combination of these two devastating blows triggered a violent, deadly outburst, feeling abandoned and humiliated. Dina was overcome with jealousy. Already emotionally unstable and struggling with alcohol dependence, she saw Kayla as a threat in more ways than one. She believed that Kayla had stolen David from her, as their relationship had crossed the line from flirtation into something much more serious. This betrayal, coupled with Kayla's plans to escape their shared sent Dina into a fit of rage. Late on the night of March 26, 2017, after a confrontation that quickly escalated, Dina attacked Kayla in their small Roseville home, fueled by anger and alcohol. Dina brutally beat her daughter using anything she could find. Her fists, household objects and whatever else was nearby. The attack was savage, and Kayla was left unconscious, unable to defend herself against her mother's uncontrollable fury. Realizing what she had done, Dina panicked. The blizzard outside was fierce, with heavy snow and frigid winds whipping through the streets of Roseville in a desperate attempt to cover up her crime. Dina dragged her daughter's limp body out into the cold. She hoped the severe weather conditions would conceal the brutal beating. Dina left Kayla's unconscious, bruised body in the parking lot of a local school, hoping the snowstorm would erase any traces of her involvement. The police, piecing together the timeline and motive, now had a clear suspect on April Fool's Day. DEA was arrested at the house she once shared with Kayla. She showed little emotion during the arrest, and her demeanor suggested she had long since resigned herself to the consequences of her actions. When confronted with the evidence, Dina barely reacted, neither surprised nor remorseful. Kayla's friends and family were left devastated by the arrest, struggling to comprehend the horrific truth that her mother had been the one responsible for her tragic death. By March of 2018, the trial of Dina Carlson for the murder of her daughter Kayla had captivated Roseville. The prosecution, led by Assistant District Attorney Marissa Greggs, a 38-year-old known for her non-nonsense demeanor, argued that Dina had killed her daughter out of a toxic combination of jealousy, rage, and desperation. Griggs presented the evidence of Dina's violent outburst after learning about Kayla's relationship with David Carlson and her plan to leave home. The prosecution painted a picture of a woman driven to madness by feelings of abandonment and betrayal, lashing out in the most brutal way possible. Griggs emphasized the brutal nature of the attack, the lengths Dina went to in staging the crime scene, and how she had left her daughter to die in the harsh cold, hoping the blizzard would hide the true cause of death. The defense, led by attorney Scott, lancing a 45-year-old with a reputation for taking on difficult cases, tried to argue that Dina had not intended to kill her daughter. Lansing claimed that Dina had been overwhelmed by years of emotional and financial strain, made worse by her alcohol dependency and the toxic relationship with David. Lansing's defense strategy focused on portraying Dina as a victim of her circumstance, a woman pushed to the brink by years of neglect and abuse, both from David and from life in general. He argued that Kayla's death was a tragic accident, not premeditated murder. The trial was emotionally charged, with Kayla's friends and family filling the courtroom. Her classmates from high school, former co-workers from Target, and even neighbors came to watch the proceedings. Kayla's remaining family members were devastated, visibly shaken throughout the trial, especially as they heard the graphic details of her final moment. After several days of deliberation, the jury found Dina guilty of second-degree murder. The sentence was 25 years to life in prison, a verdict that left many feeling conflicted. Some thought the punishment was too light, given the brutal nature of the crime, while others believed it was fair, considering Dina's mental state of the time, Four's family and friends, though no sentence could bring her back, leaving them to grapple with a loss that would affect them for years to come. After the trial concluded in March 2018, Dina Carlson was sent to prison to serve her sentence of 25 years to life for the murder of her daughter Kayla. The prison she was assigned to, Minnesota Correctional Facility. Chaco is known for housing female inmates and offers various programs aimed at rehabilitation. Dina struggled with her new reality, battling feelings of guilt and shame. Reports indicated that she had difficulty adjusting to prison life, often isolating herself from other inmates. Dina's struggles with alcoholism continued, and she participated in substance abuse programs in an attempt to cope with the demons that had haunted her for years. Meanwhile, David Carlson, who had been Kayla's mother's boyfriend and played a complicated role in this tragic story, faced his own consequences after Kayla's death. David lost his job as a construction worker due to the public outrage surrounding the case and the scrutiny of his past behavior. He moved away from Roseville to avoid the backlash from the community. However, local news reports revealed that he continued to struggle with maintaining stable employment. Friends noted that he felt guilty for being involved in the family's dysfunction, but often deflected responsibility. David ultimately chose to lead a quiet life away from the media. Spotlight grappling with the role he played in the events that led to Kaya's tragic death. As for Lucas Doyle, Kayla's ex-boyfriend, he also faced the repercussions of the fallout. After their breakup, Lucas was reportedly distraught and became the subject of rumors and speculation in their school and community, struggling with feelings of jealousy and loss. Lucas found it hard to cope. He graduated from high school in June 2018, but struggled to find direction afterward. He moved to a neighboring town to start fresh. But the memories of Kayla and their tumultuous relationship weighed heavily on him. Friends indicated that he often reflected on his past actions and the tragic outcome of the situation, seeking therapy to address his feelings of guilt and regret for the community of Roseville. The impact of C's murder remained palpable. Many residents attended memorial events in her honor and participated in discussions about domestic violence, mental health, and the importance of community support systems. Though Kayla's story ended tragically, her memory inspired some to advocate for change, ensuring that her life and the circumstances surrounding her death would not be forgotten. The tragic murder of Kayla Carlson is a reminder that even the closest relationships can turn deadly when jealousy, anger, and fear take over. Though justice was served, the pain left behind for her family and friends will last a lifetime. Thank you for listening to this episode of True Crime Case Files. Join us next time as we uncover more shocking cases that continue to puzzle and disturb. Stay safe. Everyone, hey, True Crime Case, solvers interested in more real-life murder mysteries, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel. And do you have any thoughts about this case or have a case of your own you'd like us to investigate? Leave us a comment. Stay safe. True Crime Case Solvers.